Great. Hopefully that all works and just excites people again who were at the retreat, and just gives a bit of a flavour to everyone else. So I'm going to add our panelists for today and Peter, and hand over to you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. That video is amazing, and it's got the soundtrack there of a song that Andy Flanagan released at our last retreat, and he released another one at this one, and we hope to share that with you online again as well for those who weren't there. It's a fantastic new video and comes from a kind of wanting to connect a faith with all of life. So thank you for all those who took a punt with us and turned up in Cambridge for those 2 amazing days. And thank you for those who are on this call who weren't there, who have decided it's worth coming to a session that focuses on a retreat they weren't at. And we've kind of done our best to fill you in on some of the kind of key messages and takeaways through having this panel. And some of you have very kindly, informally got back to us saying you're happy to share your thoughts off the cuff in addition to the panelists. So this is your cue to bring that in appropriately during the Q&A and discussion time. And if you don't, I might send you a little reminder on chat. I know who you are. So thank you. Thank you to those who've said they'll do that informally. And thank you to our panelists who are going to give us their little reflection. We're going to go Gavin, and then Ofonime, and then Ben. And Gavin, you're first. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Great to see you, everybody. It was easy for me to be at the retreat because I live in Cambridge, so it was a short cycle ride. But I was really restless and almost angry for the whole first day of that retreat. I didn't have great expectations of it. If I'm quite honest, I don't go to retreat naturally and often enough. But I found it a tremendous time, I've got to say. Even though I was restless, something was stirring in me for the whole of the first day. And for some reason, I didn't know why it was. And I was brought to a time of a chat to somebody there on the Friday evening over supper, where I opened up and expressed things that I never thought I would even go near to expressing, let alone make a decision about. It was extraordinary. There were things very deep down inside me that I ended up talking about to somebody on the Friday evening. And over the course of the retreat, I made a huge decision and a huge shift, and was very happy with its ramifications, all during the same event. And it was a life-changing decision. I won't go into the details of it because the details of it haven't been worked out and will take a while to work out. But it was a huge shift. God had been preparing for me and doing something deep in me on that Friday. And on that Saturday, I couldn't have been happier. And I met somebody on the Saturday. He said, I couldn't come near you yesterday. You looked angry. I didn't want to come anywhere near you. And I'd never met this chap before. And I was able to also have a conversation with somebody on the Saturday. I met over coffee, I think, or lunch on the Saturday, and able to speak to him. And as we were talking, I got prompted to tell him a certain story. And I told him that story, and he said to me that it was, I'd spoken exactly into his life. And I'd only just met this guy. It was an extraordinary time. And I know, because I know that there was a call to prayer during the few days before. And I know that happened because of the layering of prayer that it was called upon before the retreat. So I would say it was a tremendous time. I loved it, although I was angry for 50% of it. Andy Flanagan's worship was tremendous. His worship leading, his songs, the words you're singing are so pertinent to real life in a way that I don't think I've ever encountered before. His 7 Days song, especially, I was very moved by. I brought a friend along because I accidentally paid for 2 tickets. I didn't tell Stephen that, but I accidentally paid for 2 tickets. So I was able to bring a friend, and I know he loves ideas, he loves talking, and he loves connecting with people. So it was great to have him. Yes, Phil, let's have a chat, Phil. there's a new direction happening for me, and I can't go into details really. It wouldn't be fair on people, but I'd love to connect another way. So thank you so much, Peter, Stephen, Dawn, other members of the committee, Richard. I was inspired truly, and I just say, please take the time to retreat. It's not something I naturally do. I don't understand why I don't do it more often when I benefit from it hugely every single time I do it. So that's my little bit, and thank you, Faith in Business, for hosting it. And what a great venue in the union. So thank you for that as well. That's my bit. Afonime, it's your turn.
Thank you, Gavin.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Gavin. Good afternoon to everyone. I think I'll start with a little introduction of myself. My name is Afonime. If you think of a light switch, turn it off, turn it on, Ime Afonime. But you're not allowed to call me Switch, I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen. But it means it's good to be patient. I was invited to the Faith in Business retreat by Peter, actually. I thought it quite curious because in terms of professionally, I got called to the bar in England, Wales a number of years ago. I know none of you are too young or too old. In fact, let's move past that. Then I crossed over to become a solicitor. I worked in private practice and went up and was appointed a director, heading up a significant department with a massive turnover. And then I just felt I wanted a second career. And so I went into the public sector, and I serve as a civil servant advising ministers currently on animal welfare legislation, soon to do data protection, which will affect us all. So I found myself a curious person to be coming to a Faith in Business retreat. I will plug the fact that whilst my husband is self-employed, and I've always had these ideas of things to do, it's not something that I personally have done. I don't have or own a business. But anyway, I found myself at this retreat by invitation, and I thought, I always have the attitude to try something at least but once. And so I was very, very impressed personally when I'm thinking about the retreat, location-wise, content-wise, and the company. On location, we were in Cambridge, such a significant place to be. I was amazed. Everyone around me seemed to live in Cambridge. It made me a little bit jealous. I thought to myself, I must move to Cambridge because that's where it's all happening. But I was relieved to hear that Ben flew in all the way from the other side of the world. So it made me feel that I was in welcome company there. But Cambridge was beautiful. We got to go around and hear the historical relevance of some of the things that had happened in the city and how it tied into business as well. And I thought, venue-wise, where we were, Cambridge Union Society, they couldn't have picked a better place, So for me, very humbling that I was stood in the shoes of others who had gone before with clarity of thought of where they were going. And as a lawyer, for me, that was very attractive. Content. When it came to the content, I was very impressed by the broad spectrum of speakers that they brought, and all with a God focus, but specialists in their field. And so we had this thing called Heart Talks, and every Heart Talk was different. We had it from people in business, people in theology. You're going to hear from Ben shortly. And I was very impressed, but also it got me thinking about investments, my investments. I don't know about you. I'm one that I try my hands at anything. I've got some stocks and shares, I try to do it all by myself, but I had never deeply thought as much as I do about my giving, what I'm investing in, where the different strands to these investments go. And so for me, the content, the different speakers, there were short bursts of these conversations, but they kept on giving me things and notes to reflect on. I was very, very blessed that it was also from a God focus, because in life we have people coming in from different Eastern religions, different influences into what they're pumping into us. And to know that this was biblically and theologically based was very attractive for me. Third thing, company. My goodness me, I was very impressed. We had people in fashion, people in charities, people in education, people in theology. Then you had me, the random public servant, They had all different works of life, all coming interested in business. People who had walked away from their 9 to 5 and investing into their community. People who had made millions, but investing into the body of Christ. People, for me, that mix, that it was just such a mix. It was kind of like going into London and trying Turkish one minute, Lebanese another. Honestly, it was coming at me. I met this young man. I thought he looked 16. My goodness me. Then he came forward speaking about this multi-million-dollar company. I'm thinking, he looks so young. He doesn't even look old enough to own this. And so that was the rich flavor of all that we had over the retreat. I was so pleased that I invested my time. I came from sunny Kent, the Garden of England. I came down to Cambridge, and I was pleased that I made that effort, although I stayed in a hotel that looked like the Fawlty Towers. I haven't spoken to Peter about this, but we will have words on it. So honestly, check your shindigs where you're going to be staying if you come next year. But beyond that, I thought that it was a very refreshing, thought-provoking time for me. I have so many notes here, but the ones that I want to leave you with was one of the heart talks. Was a guy called Busoye Aiwifalade. They all had some very unique names. Forgive me if I have botched up the name here. But he said, and these were the poignant things, trusting in God for the moment. There was a chap who spoke about walking out of his 9 to 5 and starting a charity and birthing other businesses. And that stuck with me. The capacity, no fruitfulness without sacrifice. Calling me in terms of what am I going to do next to Fonime, and consistency to pray for everything. One of the thoughts, I should leave you all with that kept coming back is that the return on generosity is joy. And there's still things. Have I started a business yet? No, I haven't. But I'm really thinking about it. There's some ideas and I'm still working on it. Have I been thinking about my investments? Yes, I have. Are they ethical? Will they give God all the glory? So much more to say, so little time to say it. But thank you very much for listening in. I think I hand over this point to Ben.
Thanks, Afonime. And I won't share with as much energy or verve as Afonime, but the retreat was such a blessing. And we were asked to just think about, how did God invest in us, and what does it really mean for him to invest in us? And I went back to 2 Corinthians with the group that I studied the Bible with here. And we were reading in 2 Corinthians 7 about how Paul was going through a period of real struggle. And God served him by sending Titus to come and sit with him in the midst of his struggle. And that was the way that God had comforted and guided Paul in that moment. And Titus, in turn, had been blessed by his visits with the Corinthians. And as I thought more about the retreat, I reflected that that's what I experienced at the retreat, that God came into my life through all the various Christians that were at the retreat. I found it to be an incredibly warm time of fellowship. Every heart was open, despite what Gavin said about being angry on the first day. The overall impression that people's hearts were open, willing to speak with each other, and like Afonime also reflected, to cross over the barriers of the different careers and backgrounds that we had, the variations in wealth and experience kind of faded away because of the depth of our shared identity in Christ. So at the retreat, I just felt that I was being invested in kind of minute over minute, not only by the program that was put together with such care, but also by the individuals that I interacted with over coffee and over meals and over glasses of wine. And that was a great experience for me. I think that that investment into me, this pouring of a personal presence into me at the retreat, really allowed me to think about my own path and consider some of the things I've been studying, and to feel more able to share out of that experience. And I appreciated that. So when I was called on to speak on Saturday, it was very easy to get up and just to share just what I was feeling, the things that were in my heart and in my head as I was studying investment as a theme. And so kind of following some other Christians on what to do with our investments, I just walked the group through an example of, on the one hand, laying out our investment retirement funds, where we're buying stocks and bonds and where we have our cash stored, and then comparing that to our charitable giving and asking, why would there be such a difference in logic between the two? That one is entirely aimed at making money and the other is entirely focused on the good that's being done by the various charities that we invest in. And I asked if, before the face of Christ, if the difference in this logic on how we invest our funds is really justifiable. And I suggested at the end of that we ought to consider all of our investments as a moral opportunity first, and then second, to think about return and risk. After the retreat, Peter mentioned that he had written a booklet that said the very same thing, or something very close to it, about 20 years ago. So I was happy to be repeating ideas from a much more thoughtful person. I think after the retreat, I've been thinking more about the kind of opportunity to work in my own life and to serve others, and thinking about investment. So it's freed me up to consider maybe even leaving my job to go into full-time studies to help people further think about some of these issues. And Don at the retreat had mentioned that after retreats, it's tough to return home and keep that same momentum of the experience. And I find that that's the case, but it still planted these seeds in me to think about my own walk and my own career differently. And I really appreciate the freedom that it involved. So with that, I'll hand it back to Peter.
Thank you, Ben. If you're interested, the book was this one is, again, it's 20 years old, Globalization, Unraveling the New Capitalism. And the quote is quite short. I write in here, and it seemed like a bonkers idea 20 years ago, and I never thought anybody would be talking about it 20 years later, but this is what I wrote. It has been estimated that Christians control 10 trillion US dollars around the world, about a quarter of the world's annual production of wealth. If Christians were to decide to invest their wealth differently and shape institutions to achieve this goal, we could help to change the global economy. And I think that was a bonkers idea then, a bonkers idea now, but Ben is bonkers enough to think that it might still have legs. And if we would like to discuss that during this call or in your breakout groups, please do, because if it's going to happen, we need a bunch of very committed Christian professionals at the kind of top of the profession in finance to get this going, but it could be world changing. All right, so now down to your questions and comments. Questions and answers can either be live or in chat. So do use either facility. If you want to say something, indicate by.
Neil Fraser, for those that might recognise it from the retreat. So I'd just like to sort of, agree with everything said. Great panels, great briefs. I might be one of the people on there with nothing to invest, because I'm spent too long in the army, so I haven't got a lot of wedge swilling around to invest in things. But I thought the talk about your attitude to investment vice your attitude to sponsorship was really interesting. And what was interesting is that, sorry, I forgot the name of the chap who presented it. His investments were all sort of home-based and US regional-based. Whereas I think many of the group I chatted with, our investments were largely into the third world, to charities in the third world, either Christian or aid charities, which I thought was quite interesting, was I don't invest much at home, I invest abroad. And I sponsor abroad rather. So that was quite interesting. There was another thing that sort of fell with me, which was one of the early speakers said there were only 3 things we do in life, which is we make stuff, we fix stuff, and we sustain stuff. And actually I found that quite compelling from a company perspective. So I'm in a satellite communications company now. Having left the army, and I just looked at it from how do we value different people in their role in life, as to whether they're making new things, was all exciting, and we tend to get very fixated on making stuff. We kind of value the people who fix stuff, but the kind of people who just sustain an organization, I just wonder whether we value enough. So there's quite a lot of sort of very good management stuff that came out of the retreat. So the talks that were all the videos from America, if you took about 10% of them out,
That's great.
So really, really useful stuff. So I'll be coming again. I suspect.
That's great. Craig, would you like to come in here, Craig?
Yeah, sure, Peter. Thank you so much. It's pretty apt that you opened with Andy's song, because I've just been humming that on repeat since the retreat and not been able to get it out of my head. And in fact, I've introduced it to our office worship. So my whole office is now humming the song, thanks to Andy and to you for facilitating that. I think there were 6 points that I took away from the 8 pages of notes that I made. Some of you are on this.
As possible, Craig.
Yep. So one is, we can't restrict God's calling. One can't restrict God's calling on their life based on their perceived capacity or abilities. The second was, as Christians, we should go beyond ethical investment and strive for redemptive impact. Investing in this way need not to be to the detriment of profits. And a myth that was debunked by Tim was that in order to do good, you can't make a profit. The third was, investment has the potential to amplify our voice, and it gives us a seat in places of authority. Was that the fourth? Capital is entrusted to individuals, but it is ultimately a shared resource. The fifth was, we are raising our children and young people to think for us in the future. And 6 is, he will make all things new, and until he does, we will trust in him. I just thank you to all of you involved for putting on the retreat, and I look forward to seeing you all next year in person.
Great. Thank you, Craig. That's great. I think Buddy is next.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see some friendly and familiar faces. I guess my reflections, firstly, I have a horrible memory. And so I'm a real fan of a soundbite with meaning. And I think one of those sound bites that I've been reflecting on, someone's already mentioned as well, but it was Martin Luther King Jr. And we have a high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds. And that has just been going over and over in my head ever since. And it's worked its way into an article that I've written. It's worked its way into a Nigerian wedding that I was preaching at this last weekend. So I think, so for me, I've been to a lot of Christian conferences, and my expectations are often fairly low. And I didn't really know many people coming into this. And I just want to say that there were other things that stick out besides that quote. But the thing that stuck out the most was just the friendliness of everyone, the building, the new relationships, meeting new people, and a lot of people sharing. There were some of you who are very successful entrepreneurs doing amazing things. And then there were lots of us who are wondering what that next step is at the moment. We're not necessarily doing that yet and are looking for that next step. And it was nice to be around that group of people, but searching what God is leading them into, and being able to start it with the understanding that we were given through Ben's talk, among others, is amazing. There's a lot of a lot of heart talks to think about and to build on. So thank you again for putting the conference on, and it far exceeded my expectations.
Thank you. That's great. We do have a number of business owners on this call and at the retreat. One of them's Matthew Kimpton Smith. I don't know, Matthew, whether you have anything you'd like to share. Don't feel under any pressure, but if you do, I know that you were taking notes, and I was very impressed that Matthew went off and sat under a tree, I think, in the spare time, and he made some notes to himself. So I thought, oh, maybe he's got something to share back. But if you don't worry.
I'm just well trained. I do what I'm told, and I was told to use that time to reflect.
Good for you.
But I had a great couple of days, as I think everyone that's spoken is agreeing. Where it was special for me was I felt equally supported but challenged, and that process of the support challenge with enough, let's say, freedom or flexibility in the schedule to allow me to go off and think, I think, relatively deeply about where I was being challenged. I just got a huge amount from it, and I came away with, let's say, an action plan for what I felt the Lord was leading me to in my life, in business and in my personal life. And that all sounds good, and I've shared that with my wife, and I'm moving forward with it. But with a little bit more time, what's really jumped out at me are three things, and that was create, redeem, sustain. And the conference theme for me was the fact that God creates, redeems, and sustains, and He's also calling us to do the same. And we're all different. We all have different sort of challenges and opportunities. But I've come away thinking, actually, this really hit me. The create in terms of make things, the redeem in terms of fix things, and the sustain in terms of keep things going. And I've looked at my life, and I'm going, I want to say wow at a very basic level, but I came into the conference thinking much more about how could I do a bit of redeeming, but a lot of sustaining through the rest of my life. And I feel now that was a negative approach to what the Lord has for me or wants me to be doing. And actually, the Lord is calling me, potentially all of us, but He's calling me to think about, how do I create appropriately? How do I redeem and fix what I've got? And how do I then sustain in the right way and move forward and keep all of these three things in balance, both in my work life and in my sort of non-working life? And I'm loving that challenge, and we'll throw it open to all of you as to one, only, how to help me shape it. And I'm sure others are going through similar things, but it's the sustainability of it. So today on this call, it's been hugely beneficial already, because it's called me back to really look at the detail of what I wrote and what we did. And I'm going, oh yeah, I meant to do that, but it just dropped off the list. And oh yeah. And I feel a bit embarrassed to say it, but I need it. And I'm sure a lot of us need that reminder, that kick, because I committed to do a couple of things, with various people. And I'm like, right, I've really got to make sure I do that. I'm going to put it in the diary as soon as this is over, or as we're talking. I just encourage all of you to grab the opportunities we've got, create, redeem, and sustain.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Matthew. I love that, because it's so well theologically grounded. And for Anglicans, this coming Sunday is Trinity Sunday when we think about the Trinity. And I suppose one way to think of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is as creator, redeemer, and sustainer. It's impartial. It doesn't say everything we want to say about the Trinity, but it's a very good start. So thank you for making theology come alive with those comments.